waiting to connect, and I believe we might be live. I don't have a timer yet.
Oh,
Usually it gives me a timer when it starts, so I don't know. But
you had 20 seconds on mine, so we're good.
oh, geez. Oh, my Lanta. All right. Well, without any further delay, we are live on the PG Dynasty podcast. This is one of the more fun times of the year in terms of our podcast. We get to talk about all the teams, every single player on every single team. Hopefully, some in great length, and hopefully not in great length too, with some of the back end guys. But we will break this down as much as we can with the Kentucky Elk today, starting at the bottom of Dynabook's power rankings. The Elk have a lot of players to talk about for sure this year. A big transition year in the year of the rebuild to see if we can try to turn this thing around. Sean, how are you doing, my friend?
Man, I'm doing great. It's already July. Feels like we're right around the corner, man.
That's true. We are getting close.
Now we're going to be drafting teams. It's great.
Oh, geez, it's going to be awesome. And then we're going to have, all the redraft festivities and back to DraftKings and all the fun stuff that we've been missing for quite a while. It has moved pretty fast, I'll say that, though. I feel like this offseason has moved pretty quickly. So, all right. So, Sean, I think you said you had a mini game for today.
Yeah, you want to start with it?
Mini game. Let's start with it. Screw it.
All right, so I just picked a random year. Well, I knew which year it was, but I didn't know what year it was. Like, I knew what happened that year, but I'm looking to see if you can name the top 5 tight ends from the 2015 season. Because this was a weird-ass season. I thought it would be fun.
2015.
So,
and this is the top 5. Kelsey was drafted in 2013. And he sat behind Anthony Fasano for the first year. So I don't know if he would be in quite yet. But I'll hold that one for a second. So I think Gronkowski would probably be the easy one, right?
You are correct.
Okay. Now it's getting challenging already. Like this is where I get unsure of it. I gotta think of a couple of different teams to start, like the different divisions, go through those. Boy, it's too early for Kittle, probably too.
That is correct.
What about? I don't know if he's top 5, like Greg Olsen, maybe.
He was number 4 that year.
Oh shit! Okay. So who the heck was 2?
Greg Olsen, 77 catches for 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns that year. Pretty good year for a tight end.
I mean, it sounds pretty good to me.
This was a good tight end year.
And you said this is a weird one though.
But it's weird. Yeah.
So that implies that there's some Jagaloons in here. I don't know.
Let's see. I'll give you.
I might need a hint.
I'll give you a hint on number 2. Often injured.
Well, I was got shit. George Kittle is a shoo-in. 2015 always injured. Is he AFC or NFC?
NFC.
Zach Ertz? Maybe?
No, Zach Ertz was 10 that year.
Oh, shit. He's hurt a lot.
This player was tight end 2 in 14 games played this season.
Tight end 2, 14 games played.
87 catches, 952 yards, and 11 touchdowns.
11? That's a lot of touchdowns.
Yeah.
NFC. Who's it? Giants never had good tight ends during this time frame.
You're on the right track.
Right track.
Right division.
Oh, so NFC East maybe. So we said no. Jordan Reed?
It's Jordan Reed, number 2.
He had 11 touchdowns.
Oh yeah.
I really didn't like Jordan Reed. He was not one of my favorites, that's for sure. He was like the Evan Ingram that everybody thought Evan Ingram was going to be. Like they want him to be Jordan Reed.
Yeah, he just couldn't stay healthy. He would have been.
He was hurt all the time. I would love to see. Actually, I'm gonna look him up real quick because I want to see how many games like he missed a year. I feel like it was always like 4 or 5. Let's say he played 9, 11, 14, 12, 6, 13, 10. Yeah, never finished a full season. Yeah. That's crazy.
The tight end 6 this year was Tyler Eifert, who had
Jeez.
52 catches for 615 yards and 13 touchdowns.
Yeah, that was his big touchdown year, and James thought he hit the money.
weird tight end year where
That is
6
crazy.
plays, 13 touchdowns.
I might need assistance with the other couple. Might maybe just throw them out there.
Tight end 5, AFC South.
Indy, no, they never had good tight ends in this era. This is the Kobe Fleener era.
Not the right team, but Kobe Fleener. I'll see if I can find him. Kobe Fleener, tight end 21 that season.
Jesus. In
this guy was good for a good stretch of years. This might have been one of his. I think he might have had a tight end like 2 or 3 season also, but this guy he's good.
Tight end 2. Oh, AFC. It's got like Titans would be Walker, Delaney Walker.
Yeah.
Wow.
All right.
That is crazy. I would not have. I forgot he had that big of a year.
Tight end 3 this year. This is the reason I picked this one because I find it hilarious every time I hear the name. Is a one-hit wonder. Literally had no other good seasons besides this one.
Oh God. Jordan Cameron? Oh no, he's before that. I remember Jordan Cameron because I had him and Julius Thomas on my practice squad one year, and they both hit.
79 catches, 1,043 yards, and 9 touchdowns.
On the Browns? Is it a Browns player?
Yeah.
Cameron's the only one that's come to mind. I was like, Harrison Bryant? I love Harrison Bryant. He's not even on the team anymore. They did have another crappy tight end. I forgot. Seth DeValve. No, it's not Seth DeValve. I'm trying to think of like these other shitty Browns tight ends. They always had bad ones. I don't know. I think you have to give me this one. This is tough.
This was the year of Gary Barnidge.
Oh my God. Gary Barnidge had 1,000-yard season.
Probably the biggest one-hit wonder in fantasy football history.
I gotta look up this career. Hold on. This is
it's intense.
a 5th round pick. Oh my God. Dude, he was out of the league 2 years after that.
Yep.
He went from just a bunch of like backup years, then 100 yards, 156 yards, 1,000 yards and 9 touchdowns, back to 6-12 and 2, and never played again. That's insane. That is a hell of a career.
Out of nowhere.
He went out hot. He burned hot and fizzled out fast. That's crazy.
Kelsey was tight end 8 that year, by the way.
I was gonna say I thought it was a little too early because I feel like his first year was a wash, and his second year he wasn't ready yet.
Yeah. All right. Well, that was the top 5 tight ends for that year.
Dang, that was a fun year because I would not have gotten Gary Barnidge off.
I'm gonna do that as a dry run. We'll probably do a lot of those during the draft.
I feel like it's a great idea.
All right, you want to jump into the reason for our episode today now?
Yes, we will hop right into the Kentucky Elk team review for 2024. We got hold on a second. We got a quick comment from the Peanut Gallery. It's Alex Morales saying, "I decided I wanted to watch a comedy tonight, and Elk Breakdown is a podcast perfect watch for comedy." Wow! All right, you heard it from the league potster, Alex Morales of the Muskegon Muskrats. So, got a couple of quick facts about the Elk before we get started on the nitty gritty here. So, he finished 9th last year, 3-11, had 1287 for points for, and 1668 for points against, which was actually the second easiest schedule, and he just could not manage to pick up a couple extra wins out there. I was looking through the all-time history. Notice he has the 8th best win percentage since 2018, so that'll be 6 years back. He's finished 31-50, so it hasn't been a good stretch for the Elk over the last 6 years. Despite having the 4th most transactions, he is trying to make the changes, but it's just not enough talent to be had. He has not made the playoffs since he was the Chupacabras in 2019. So the Elk have never sniffed the playoffs with the current branding. So there's a lot of work to be done.
I do have one more fun Elk fact for
Everybody
you.
likes elk facts.
Elks during mating season, male elks attract mates by wallowing in mud and coating themselves in piss to create a perfume, which is pretty much what this roster has been doing for the last couple of years.
I mean, we know there's an animal in there somewhere, but it's under all that mud and piss.
Fun facts. There you go.
Wow, I've heard it all. Yeah, so I mean the elk. I mean, obviously with the win percentage being what it is, it just every year we've come out to the podcast. Every year we've done a team review, and it's always felt like, man, this team just doesn't have that top end talent, good enough to stay off the absolute floor up until last year. But this team needs an infusion of good young talent and some top end talent too. So the start of his rebuild, obviously, he had many trades recently over the last year or so. To try to acquire more draft picks, and he has definitely done so. He's going to have, I think, a good like 10 to 15 picks next year, something like that, some crazy number of picks, and he's got at least 4 firsts. So he is going to be in an interesting position next year as we get to the team review. But he does have guys now that can help.
What would be like a 1-sentence like summary for his roster currently for you?
Mid.
One word.
One word.
Mine would be like a lot of middling talent with a lot of contingent upside for players. He is
there's definitely upside, no doubt. But yeah, there's guys
scenarios where like if a guy next to them gets hurt, like they're going to be like a much better option in fantasy. And I feel like that's like a super like big theme throughout his roster. So
I mean, there is a path here to a playoff team. I do believe that. Mm-hmm. That being said, it's going to require quite a bit of stuff to get there, but it is possible. And I think that's what's going to make this year very interesting in this league, because not only does he have all these picks for next year and all his future capital, but he could have an Armadillos type season if everything goes right from last year. So let's get right into it here with the quarterbacks. And we have 3 quarterbacks on the roster currently. It's CJ Stroud, coming off of a very, very impressive rookie season. Trevor Lawrence, fresh off a gigantic new contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars. And then Kyle Trask, backup for the Buccaneers currently. It seems like he might be a cut candidate, but he might want to hang on to him just for an extra quarterback body. Sean, let's start at the top with CJ Stroud. I mean, truly, I didn't expect anything like what we got last year. Even after that first couple of preseason games that he played, he looked terrible, and the line looked terrible. So I thought he was going to end up, as David Carr Part 2 and just getting sacked every game and just getting smoked. Turned out to be quite the opposite. He had one of the best rookie seasons of all time. He's quickly vaulted himself all the way to the top of the quarterback rankings in Superflex leagues. He's probably a top 3 dynasty quarterback at this point, right after his rookie season. I mean, if you look at the rankings specifically, like Keep Trade Cut and stuff like that too. Let me see what he is right now. Actually, I'm curious. I have it pulled up. Looks like he might be 3. But anywho, Sean, do you think that CJ Stroud is valued currently right now? And do you think that he valued correctly, I should say, but do you think he's going to produce a similar type season to last year?
Yes, but that wouldn't give him the value of quarterback 3 in dynasty rankings. To me, like, he's very good. Like, I think he's a better real life quarterback than he's going to end up being a fantasy quarterback for most of his seasons. Unless he's like, in most leagues, we are a 6-point touchdown pass league, so that's going to help. But he doesn't really have a bunch of rushing upside, which is really the biggest cheat code for quarterbacks in fantasy. So I have him just as a starting caliber quarterback. I don't have him as like an elite quarterback in fantasy, but I mean, he is more than capable of having one of those like 4,500 yard passing seasons with like 40 touchdowns and be that guy. Those are seasons that are harder to come by than just quarterbacks with a safe floor with high rushing, like a Lamar, Jalen Hurts, Anthony Richardson, maybe this year, so on.
I mean, he like you said, he doesn't have that true rushing upside. He's ranked currently right around the same range as in the same tier quarterback 3, 4, 5, 6 with Richardson. Lamar Jackson himself and Jalen Hurts. That's kind of that tier.
Yeah, and
And
I don't think that's fair to him. I think that's a tier above where he should be.
So would you say he's in the Burrow tier, perhaps?
Yeah, and honestly, like him, Burrow, Love, like of all like the hype that CJ Stroud got last year, I think Love finished ahead of him in fantasy. But for some reason, Stroud is going way ahead of Love this year in drafts so far. So
Yeah, they have Love as QB 10 in dynasty rankings right now.
yeah, and I don't think they're far off from each other. I think that's a perfectly good tier of quarterbacks, and I think like you see those guys as like the 8th and 9th quarterbacks coming off the board. I think you're pretty happy to draft them. But I think that's about where they should be.
Yeah, I mean, I think Stroud. I mean, for this team, obviously going through the rebuild, I feel like it's a perfect fit right now with him and Lawrence. You got a two very formidable starting quarterbacks here. Mix and match if you really wanted to, but Stroud seems like an every week starter on the surface. But I still think there's untapped potential for Lawrence still as well. Last year I think he had the most drop touchdowns in the NFL. He always passes the eyeball test, and it just doesn't seem to translate into fantasy quite yet. But do you think this is the year he finally makes it happen?
Yeah, he also had a rib injury pretty early in the year, and I think an ankle injury in the same season.
He was banged up for sure.
Yeah, really cut in because he's a good runner. Like that's a value to him, and I think that just got undercut from just because of the injuries he took on last year. Which, I mean, that's the risk of running the ball. So, I mean,
and I think people were expecting him to kind of get more of that like goal line type work as far as a rusher, and maybe pick up an extra couple of touchdowns. He only had 2 last year. He had 5 the year before.
They could use it. I mean, their rushing attack could use any kind of advantage it could. I mean,
he's at 300 yards a year just in terms of rushing.
Yeah, but I agree with you. Untapped potential for sure. I have him as a fringe like starter, 10-team league, so fringe starter. I mean, that's a pretty good back-to-back quarterbacks to have on your roster. So probably the best position group on the team, I would say.
I think that's pretty fair. And just for Lawrence's rankings, as a rookie, he was number 23 with only 12 touchdowns. Sorry?
So I don't count that year. He had...
Yeah, no. I mean, there was nothing to work with. Urban Meyer, 12 touchdowns, 17 picks. Turned it right around, though. The following season, QB 8, 25 touchdowns, 8 picks. And then last year, 13 was his ranking, 21 touchdowns, 14 picks. So, I mean, maybe not going the correct direction after the really solid year. But I still think there is plenty of room for him to turn it around here. He's only 24, and he got this big new contract. So I think with some upgraded receivers too, maybe getting Brian Thomas as a deep threat, which he hasn't really had a whole lot of. I like the outlook for Lawrence.
Yeah, I think he's younger than Bo Nix.
Which is, it is accurate. Yes, he's 25. So
2 things before we move on to the next group. I will say it's a little weird, like just being in a 10-team league, probably want to have a third quarterback. Doesn't seem like that's a lot of cost that it would take him to get one, just because Lawrence has had a little bit of injury history. You don't want to be just down to one guy. So that might be something he looks at, maybe tries to address. Doesn't need another elite guy. I think just one of those like bottom feeder starters is probably good enough just to have that depth, especially if he wants to like try and scrape and claw, get a playoff spot this year. So that, and then I think Trevor Lawrence is like one of the most unrealized air yards last year. So like anytime he threw it deep, he was just getting let down by his receivers just to go along with the drop touchdown passes from last year. And what they did with the receivers, I don't think was crazy, but drafting Brian Thomas and bringing in Gabe Davis is a good way to attack that problem, I think. So should be good.
Yeah, I'm excited to watch it this year. All right, let's go to our next grouping. We're not even going to talk about Kyle Trask here. We think he's a cut candidate. So we'll move right on to the running backs. In this group, he's got a starting trio, or I guess if you want to call it like top 3 of James Cook, Tyjae Spears, and Zamir White. Rounding out the groom, there's quite a bit of depth pieces here, but let's start right off at the top with the most valuable running back on this grouping. It's going to be James Cook for the Buffalo Bills. I'm a fan of James Cook. I feel like he was kind of flying under the radar a little bit last year. He did have a pretty solid year. Finished himself with an RB11 finish, 1,022 yards, only 2 touchdowns on the ground, but also added 4 more through the air as a receiver and another 445 yards. So looking around 1,500 yards, 6 touchdowns total. Pretty quiet but solid year. And I feel like he's only 24 years old and kind of fits this timeline that the Elk are working with. Do you think there's room for improvement with Cook, or do you feel like maybe this is his ceiling? They didn't really add a whole lot going up there except for maybe like Ray Davis, but could take some of that receiving work.
I like Ray Davis a lot, actually. I think that is going to be worth something in that offense. I don't think it's going to cut much into like the productivity he can have. Just because he hasn't really been a goal line back for them. Obviously, Josh Allen is the goal line back on that team, and I don't see that changing anytime soon. So I think that's like pretty like good spots. I mean, 1,500 yards is a lot of yards for running back to get to every year. And for him, I think 6 touchdowns is probably going to be the cap. I don't see him going much above that.
So, I mean, Davis is truly a bigger. I think he's 5'8", 220. I mean, he's a banger, and I feel like he's kind of in that Damian Harris role. That they might want to reuse.
Davis fits the scheme that they've switched to much better. They've been once they switched offensive coordinators last year, they started running a lot more duo in their run game, and Ray Davis just fits that a lot better than Cook. Not to say he's going to be out snapping him. I just think there's going to be a lot of like packages where they like him more in. And I think that's just going to cut in just a little bit more than maybe people think.
Yeah, I mean, I do think that you're pretty safe to get. I mean, he only had 237 carries last year, so a little bit lower, but really was efficient. 4.73 yards per carry. And I think the efficient carries will still be there. But like you said, I do think there is a little bit of a cap with Davis coming in. And then, of course, with Josh Allen being the true goal line back there. Anyway, I still think there's a little bit of a ceiling on Cook, and I don't think we'll see him transcend into like the top 8 or anything like that. But
yeah, I mean, I have
a solid player though.
I have a very solid starter RB2.
That fits perfect. I mean, he was 11 last year, so I mean, it kind of fits right into that high end RB2, 11 through 15 range. So I'm looking forward to James Cook, and I think for this team, he's flexible, could be traded, could be held on to. It doesn't really matter which way. There's no set path for the Elk here. They don't have to do anything with him. They could easily hold on to him. Then next up, we got Tyjae Spears. Pretty solid rookie year, all things considered. I mean, didn't have a ton of work but really did a lot in the receiving game. He had 52 catches on 70 targets last year, which is way more than I was expecting when I looked at his final totals. So he touched the ball a total 152 times for about 800 yards and only a couple of touchdowns. So, I mean, all in all, it was a solid rookie year. Finished 39th, but he was behind a serious workhorse there with Derrick Henry. And they bring in a new running back, Tony Pollard, into the mix. Kind of a weird signing. I think we both thought it was a strange fit overall with Spears, but we're looking at a split backfield here, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is about as 50-50 as we're going to see this year in the NFL. For me, so like when I said earlier about contingent upside for his team, like this is like the poster child of contingent upside. If Pollard misses any time, I think Spears is like a locked and loaded like top 15 running back every week.
He was efficient with his carries last year. His 4.53 yards per carry. Obviously had all the receiving work. He not much of a blocker, obviously, at 195 pounds, but he can be a lead back, and he was towards the end of the year when he's getting some carries there with Henry. Like he showed he could do it. So obviously the injury is a concern, but
yeah, and I think like both running backs are pretty much very close as far as like measurable, like height, weight, speed. Like it's very redundant, which can be good just because like they're going to get a little bit of everything. So like you might have weeks where they're going to get you like a few receptions and like save you that week with that. So I do like that. I think it'll be hard to tell like who's going to be in what role sometimes though. So it could come down to like maybe they like one guy in the in the red zone a little more, which we'll see. That's going to tell a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think Pollard has about like 10 to 20 pounds on Tajay, so I feel like he will probably end up being the guy. I also really like Dylan Johnson, who they have as an undrafted free agent this year. I think he might find his way into the rotation, perhaps too, as a power back. So there's a chance that he can make some noise, but a long way to go for him, obviously. But Spears, like you said, there is a path for a really good season, and I think him and this next guy we're about to talk about here, it's with Zamir White, kind of battle for that RB2 spot this year for the Elk as they transition with a bunch of draft picks next year. Really not a bad trio
No?
for a rebuilding team. Certainly better than what I had last year. Just on paper, it certainly doesn't look all that bad. And they're all young guys, 23, 24-year-old guys. So I'm a fan. So let's talk about Zamir White a little bit here. Obviously, he ends up in a situation where he seems to be the clear-cut starter right now. 6 foot, 215 pounds. This is going to be his third season in the NFL. This is a guy I absolutely loved coming into the draft. Like, I love Zamir White. He was nicknamed Zeus from his time in high school. He was literally like he was on that Marshawn Lattimore stratosphere of like college recruits. And then, of course, suffered multiple torn ACLs at his time at Georgia, took away some of that electric game-breaking speed that he had at the time. At that speed and size, he was just a true difference maker. But things are a little bit different now. He's not quite as explosive, but he's still a very solid back. Finished last year with 4.34 yards per carry, 100 touches on the ground, 451 yards. Not much in the receiving game, but he did have 15 catches. They didn't really bring in a lot of people to help out. I mean, Alexander Madison, nobody even wants to talk about him at this point. I think Dylan Lobby has a chance to maybe get involved a little bit on the third down side of things, which is actually a perfect fit for White because he's not really great at those things either at this point in his career. Excellent blocker, though, I will say. So I think White should be a solid back end RB2 if he gets the touches. Now,
it was a fringe RB2-3.
Yeah, on a good roster in this league, I think he's a flex guy. Mm-hmm. But on this roster, probably RB2, maybe even over Spears just on a week-to-week basis because he's probably going to get more consistent touches. But I like the guy, and I think there is a chance that if he does make the most of his work that he gets. I mean, we're talking another good young back at 24 years old. This would be pretty nice for the Elk if all these guys hit.
Yeah, I wouldn't have any problem starting all three of these guys every week, to be honest. I think Spears maybe depends on the matchup, but White and Cook, I'd fine throw them out there every week.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you have to, like you said, for their rebuilding team, half rebuilding team, whatever you want to call this team, this is fine. And next year, it's a great running back class, so these guys might really not be needed anymore. And but for this transition year, it is a pretty good one. Chase Brown is the next guy on the list. Had some pretty explosive-looking carries towards the end of the season last year. Never really got super involved with only 44 touches on the year on the ground, but looked pretty good in the screen game in a few games and looked just explosive compared to when you see the eyeball test between him and Mixon. It was like, wow, this guy is not Joe Mixon. And you could tell the second he touched the ball. That being said, he's not really that small either. He's 5'10", 211. No. And really the only other guy on the roster that is worth anything is Zach Moss, and he's never been a full-time starter. So I feel like there is a chance that Brown, if a Moss injury happens or if Moss maybe doesn't live up to the hype, Brown could get more touches, and then you might even have a sneaky little flex play here.
Yeah, Brown is tough. I have him pegged as a design touch kind of guy where it's never going to be more than 10 opportunities a game. I would have Zach Moss more as the starter on that team, but I agree. He's never finished the season. He's never gotten a chance to be a full-time starter. Each guy's got pros and cons, but I think he's going to end up being the 2. But once again, with that contingent upside, if Moss gets hurt, he has had opportunity to be the guy. It was his last year in college where he had I don't even know 300 carry or 250 or 300 carries his last year in college, which he did well with. So I think he could do it. I just think for this offense, I think he's going to end up being more second fiddle.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I mean, like it's too hard. I mean, they did pay Moss a decent amount of money. I think they expect him to be the starter too. It's not like a true open competition. I think they've kind of insinuated in the contract that they want him to be the starter. Talking about Moss. So next guy on the list, kind of an interesting situation. Obviously, you're close to it with Kyren Williams. Blake Corum, gets drafted to the Rams. Kind of a strange landing spot for what most people expected. Seems to be kind of just a true handcuff, maybe one of the most true handcuffs in the game at this point. Sean, what do you think about Corum this year?
Yeah, I think it's going to be like a 70-30, 75-25 split would be my guess, with Corum picking up most of the scraps there. But once again, that like the upside, which is very possible. Kyren Williams has been pretty injury plagued in his career so far. So, and Corum can run this off. I think the Rams are going to be one of maybe like the best running offense that doesn't have a mobile quarterback in the NFL. Just with the investment that they've made in their interior line, like their interior line is over 1,000 pounds, which in the NFL is fucking nuts.
They're heavy. They're heavy boys.
They're super heavy. Like they've got, was it Oliva? Yeah, he's playing center. Steve Avila.
Oh, he's awesome.
I think he was drafted as a tackle, like originally. So
yeah, he's from TCU. I remember when he got drafted.
So there's
333 pounds up the middle.
Yeah, that's tough, man. I don't want to shit. And that really is just like them doubling down on like what their strength was last year. They were a very efficient red zone rushing team last year. So if anything happens to Kyren, I think Blake Corum could easily score double-digit touchdowns this year. So and he proved that he can score touchdowns in college. So I don't have any doubt that he'll be able to do it. So I mean, huge upside for him. I think easy, good bench depth to have. I mean, just wait and see.
I just think he's a really good running back. I mean, you watch the film too. It's going to be hard to keep him off the field.
He will get you whatever yardage you need. I don't know if he's ever going to get you like that 20-yard burst a lot of times.
Yeah, I feel like his absolute floor is like a Devin Singletary type, where it's just exactly what you're going to get, and it might be 4.5 yards per carry, but that might be just fine. But I think he has a much bigger ceiling, and he can receive and block as well. So I really like him. Just kind of a weird fit right now. Going down further on the list, we got Roschon Johnson up next. Really didn't do a whole lot his rookie year, and frankly, with this current situation, bringing in DeAndre Swift, keeping Khalil Herbert, he's going to be third again on the depth chart. I think he's still the best third down back on this team, which is crazy. But he just didn't have quite a bit of work last year. He only had 81 carries, 352 yards on the ground, 34 catches for 209. So really kind of a most non-factor in fantasy, 51st rank. 51 rank is not very good. So at the running back position. So, I mean, I like him. I just don't see consistent work for him this year enough to make a fantasy difference.
Yeah, I mean, I know Khalil Herbert is most likely on the trade block for them right now.
He has to be. I don't know how he's not.
Which is crazy because I feel like any team that could use like a small upgrade on running back would, I don't know, pick
Dallas
Cowboys, you pick Chargers probably too. He's good. Like he's
very good.
He is really good. Like between the 20s, he's an awful third down back. You cannot use him on third down or passing situations.
And that was the question mark on him coming out. Nobody knew if he could play on third down.
Another guy that's awful in pass protection is DeAndre Swift. So
bad.
Roschon
he got ran out of two cities.
He has a role in this offense because you have a rookie quarterback and you need to protect him. So I do see like a way where he ends up leading the team in snaps, but I honestly think he's just straight up a better running back than DeAndre Swift. I don't think DeAndre Swift's very good.
No, but I don't think. I mean, there's a reason he's bounced around so much.
Yeah, like he just has no vision. Like
he's just fast.
Yes, Yes, he is, and I don't know. He's a good receiving back, but like it's so hard to use him when you can't. You can only use him one dimensionally. Like I'm not a fan. Watched him last year. I watched him for the Lions.
I can't believe he got 24 mil. I mean, that's again, like I was like, his agent must have something going for him.
Like I said, I think Roshan's got a chance to be like he could lead the team in snaps. So we'll see. Like definitely not a guy I would want to let go, but
No,
it's not a guy you can really start with any confidence at all.
and Herbert's already 26 years old too.
Yeah.
It feels like he's been around a while, and he kind of has. This is his fourth year. Really efficient though, 4.6 carries yards per carry last year, 5.67 the year before that. So it's just like, man, just maybe you should give him the ball some more. It just doesn't seem to work out. But when you got a guy that efficient, let's bring in DeAndre Swift. Okay, cool. So let's go to the next guy on the list here, Marshawn Lloyd for the Green Bay Packers. He was a third-round draft pick in the NFL draft, so he's got some draft capital behind him. It appears that they're going to have him at kick returner. I saw that like last month that he's going to be like their primary kick returner out the gate. So that's kind of cool.
That's interesting.
At least you get to see him. I feel like this new kick return thing is really going to benefit, depth running back players. I feel like it's more of a running back play than anything else, it used to be.
They must really trust he's not going to fumble the ball. That's crazy.
Which is crazy because he was not good at that in college. Yeah, I was surprised by that myself, but I think they have Rich Bisaccia there, and he seems to know what he's doing usually. So I'll take his word for it.
I think he's going to get carries too.
He should. He's probably better than Dillon right out the box.
Matt LaFleur loves a committee. Like he does not do like one running back and one running back only. Even if they did pay Josh Jacobs, I think Lloyd's going to get on the field just because. I don't know. I don't see another running back that's better than him besides Jacobs on the roster. So
no, I agree. I feel like AJ Dillon's ship has sailed, and I think he will end up the RB2 at some point. I mean, probably not right out the gate, but I really like Lloyd as a runner. Still a little bit left to be seen as a receiver, but I think out of all the backs in this class that I watched this year, I think Lloyd had the best burst at the line of scrimmage to the first 10 yards. I mean, he looked different than all the guys in this class. Your Braylon Allens and Trey Benson's. He was the most explosive in the initial portion of the carry. So I think he, in a zone blocking scheme like this, it should be a really good fit. And I'm looking forward to seeing him getting actual touches in the preseason.
I think anybody's bias is going to put them one way or the other with Josh Jacobs, and like that's going to make you feel a certain way about whoever's behind him because Jacobs is in a new, much better situation, but he was really inefficient last year. So, like, what do you believe? Do you believe he's washed? Do you believe he's going to bounce back? So, I'm somewhere in between.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the middle. Yeah,
so
uninspired.
But I think Lloyd's going to get carries. For sure.
Yeah. I mean, it might not be. Yeah, I think it might be a similar workload actually to Roshan last year, because maybe less of the receiving work, more of the running work, kind of a thing. Next up on the list, Ty Chandler. Ty Chandler is going to be likely the backup again this year. Frankly, last year was the starter for some of the games, but he's got Aaron Jones in front of him now. He seems like the guy for the short term here, but he's always injured too. I feel like Chandler has another chance to. He's only 2 years in the league. Looked very good in pass protection when he was in last year. Actually ran the ball pretty nicely as well. 4.52 yards per carry. They just were always in bad game scripts last year. Really didn't have a whole lot of chances for him to run the ball. Only 102 carries. So I like Chandler still as a depth guy. I feel like he's an ideal depth guy in this league with upside that maybe get some more. As Aaron Jones tends to get hurt a lot. So I think this is maybe even a tradable player towards the middle of the year. Maybe if he has, kind of a starting gig here and there's a team contending, I could see a flip here as well.
If Aaron Jones gets hurt and like Dustin doesn't want to like push for like playoff spot, like that's like an instant trade block player.
Yeah. If he's got the backfield, he's got the efficiency too to make you believe that he's good and maybe can have future value as well. But I like
the camp chatter is like it's going to be closer to a committee than like people might believe. So
I mean, he
like a
was good when he played last year.
40 split, like I could see that pretty easily, to be honest.
I wouldn't be totally shocked with that at all. I mean, I feel like I just don't think Jones is meant to be an every down back anyway. So it's just that's just not his style. So I think Chandler will have meaningful touches. All right, getting to the bottom of the roster, we're not going to spend a whole lot of time down here, but we will mention everybody. We pride this podcast on mentioning every single player at some point. So Ronnie Rivers, probably a cut candidate for the Rams, probably a cut candidate here for the Elk as well. Too many other bodies. I think this actually might be mostly contingent on J.K. Dobbins' ability to stay healthy. Is he going to end up being the RB3 or 2 maybe? So Rivers is probably a cut candidate here. Out of the rest of these guys, I think Will Shipley is the guy that actually has some of my interest here.
I agree.
I think he's just got some mustard. I think there's something there with Shipley. I'm not a fan of the fact that he didn't totally dominate at the college level, but I don't think we're expecting that here. He was a 5th pick, but he looks like a solid player. Will be a good special teams player, but I think he's going to end up with some sort of role here with the Eagles, who only have Kenny Gainwell really ahead of him at this point. So I could see him competing for that.
Yeah, there's a decent chance that he ends up being the handcuff for Saquon. So I think that's a hold him and see what happens in training camp preseason.
Yeah, I think for this team, he's one of the guys that should be rostered probably, but we'll get to the end of this episode. We're going to try to make the cuts for Dustin to see what we would do if we were in his shoes. So we'll get to that in a little bit. Maybe we'll talk about some of these other guys like Evan Hull, D'Ernest Johnson, and Isaiah Davis when we get down there. So let's go to the receivers for now. So the receiving room, it's very interesting. There's a lot of upside here. But as we've talked about in years past, a lot of guys that are just outside that elite tier. I think there's one guy that we both probably agree could get there, maybe even as soon as this year, but probably not based on the overall situation. But I feel like Malik Nabers has the shot to be the guy for this room that he's really been needing for so long. I just think he's a special player, Sean. So I know we were talking a little bit before we got started here. What do we think for his rookie season? What are we looking at for Nabers?
Do you remember Jalen Waddle's rookie year?
I do remember Jalen Waddle's rookie year. It was just a fun year.
Hampered with targets.
He really was.
So many targets, but not a lot to do with them because the team around him wasn't very good, is kind of where I'm going with Nabers for this year.
And he looked good every time he touched the ball.
Get the ball in his hands. Let's see what he can do with it, because we know we can't throw the ball downfield because that's not something that Daniel Jones does, and Drew Lock doesn't do it very well. So
and there's never time to throw it long.
Well, their offensive line has been patched back together.
To be retooled, yeah.
I mean, it was one of the worst situations I've ever seen for a team last year with their offensive line. They
couldn't do anything.
They were hurt. They were on third string guys on 4/5 of the offensive line most of the year. So they pulled a guy off of the couch and he was their best offensive lineman in the second half of the year. I'm blanking on his name, but
I can't remember either.
But he literally was I'm off the couch, and he fucking tweeted it. He wasn't
unbelievable.
But I think I don't see him getting the ball deep a lot. So it's gonna really, really cap what he can do. And I just don't think there's not gonna be a lot of touchdowns to go around again, because this offense still isn't gonna be great. It's tough because they've never had a good receiver. So is it the chicken or the egg? Which one does this offense need? But I lean more towards it's still not going to be a good offense, but he's going to do the most he can with what he's given.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jalen Waddle is a phenomenal comparison because he does have a very similar athletic, background and trait field. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that actually works really well in this scenario. And like you said, I think he has Odell level upside, where he is so athletic and can literally just out athlete the person in front of him. And I think at very least this year, his floor will be at least a flex player with, wide receiver 3 mm-hmm. kind of looks, depending on how much he actually gets targeted. If he gets, 10 targets a game, 10 touches a game, he could be right up there with the rest of them. It's just a matter of can they push the ball down the field enough for him to get enough yardage to make it worth a while every week? Or is it going to be another Wan'Dale Robinson, 10 yards over the middle, 10 yards over the middle, nothing special down the field, and then you kind of end up with just like a wide receiver 3?
Yeah, I spent a lot of time statting out Malik Neighbors because it's just like it's so tough to predict rookies. And I think I gave him a 25% target share in the offense, which for a rookie is
a lot.
Is a lot.
They need it though, man. They really need
it. What would you set as over under for touchdowns this year?
5.
Yeah, I was thinking 4.5 or 5.5, and I think 5 is a sweet spot. I think that's what I gave him. I also gave him some rushing stuff too, just because I think they're going to
give him the ball. They're going
to try any which way to get him the ball. So you could see him break off like a 50-yard end around. That wouldn't shock me at all.
No, I just think he's a great player, and I think a great prospect will find a way to get.
Yeah, there was 3 franchise wide receivers in this draft. I think all 3 of those teams that got them should be very happy.
Yeah, I mean, and frankly, if Dable and Shane want to save their jobs, they're going to get this guy the ball. They have to. They have no other choice. So, anywho, so that's the kind of like the upside guy to the top 3 here. Let's go to Chris Olave next. Just pretty rock solid, man. Last year finished with 138 targets, 87 catches, 1,123 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Pretty much the same as he had the year before, maybe a little bit extra. But he did play 16 games as opposed to 15 from his rookie season. So, missed a week, but still showed up with 1,100 yards and 5 touchdowns. I think Olave is just rock solid, and you're not going to have to worry about him. You're looking at a guaranteed, like 25 to 18 kind of finish maybe at the wide receiver position.
Okay.
What's that?
So that's lower than I have him, but
I mean, based on the last 2 seasons, he's 22 and 24. So I mean, I don't know how much extra work there's going to be.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not far off him. I think his ceiling is like a fringe, like wide receiver 1, but I have him as a mid 2.
Yeah, like 15, I could see, I suppose. Depending on, like, frankly, they just don't have a whole lot else in the receiving game here. It's Rashid Shaheed is solid, but he's not an every down, wide receiver 2, in my opinion. And they don't really have anybody else. I mean, we're talking about A.T. Perry, Bub Means, Equinemius St. Brown, Cedric Wilson.
Olave, and then Kamara is second in targets on this
Probably
team.
Kamara. Yeah. And then really, Juwan Johnson got hurt. So
he's already hurt, so I don't know what we'll talk about him later, I guess, too.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a weird such situation here. For basically, like, he shouldn't get less targets. So that's I think a 140 would be pretty much what we'd be looking for again.
Yeah, new offense too.
That's true.
Kubiak Jr. over there now, so which I like. I think that's a vast improvement because that offense was stale as hell last year.
Yeah, so. It was boring. I just think he's a rock solid receiver, and I think he's going to end up being, to me, he's in the Terry McLaurin, from a few years ago, where it's like, okay, we know what we're going to get every year. It might not blow you away, but we see the upside. It's just never quite there.
Maybe like a small step down from like what Brandon Cooks was doing like the first 5 years. He's in the
NFL. Very similar.
Very he's like, oh yeah, I forgot this guy was this good. Like, but he produces every year.
And does he take the most headshots of anybody?
He's gonna die.
I feel like, he's the 2 of wide receivers. This guy gets smoked every week.
Speaking of a guy that puts up consistent numbers every year, we could go to the next receiver.
Yeah, Devontae Smith, man, he is a rock solid guy. Just got paid too.
Underpaid, apparently.
Apparently underpaid. Finished as wide receiver 30, wide receiver 10, and then last year was number 22. 100 targets a year guaranteed. Upside for even more if AJ Brown happens to be hurt at any given time. It's finished with 5 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns, 7 touchdowns. So very rock solid. Probably another similar year, right, Sean? Nothing too different.
Can I interest you in 1,100 yards and 7 touchdowns every year from one of your receivers?
If the answer is you, which should be everybody in the league, then
I don't think anybody's complaining about their third wide receiver is doing that every year. So,
nope.
I'm happy with that. That's all I got. I'm biased, so it's hard to ask me to say a negative thing about him.
If Neighbors can reach that, even if it's not elite, but just under elite next year, this wide receiver core is set at what I really set. And, at that point, you can kind of just have that be the base of the team with all these other draft picks they have. So I really do like what the Elk are doing here at the receiver position. Then another guy they just added this year as well, Ladd McConkey, out of Georgia, going to get quite a few touches right out the gate. I mean, he's going to touch the ball.
Speaking of bias.
Yeah, seriously. I love him too. I think he's going to be a good rookie candidate and should at least be a flex player, I would think, towards the end of the year.
They bring on the hate comments from the rest of the league. I have him ranked ahead of Neighbors this year in fantasy.
Yikes. Wow, that's a big one. That's a big one. Put that on the Dynabook line.
Bring it on.
That would actually be a really fun one because, I mean, I would bet Neighbors just based on raw talent. Just raw power. It's just raw power.
I would be very afraid to take that bet, but I don't know. Ladd's got
he's gonna touch the ball a lot.
Yeah.
I feel like McConkey is just a perfect fit for that offense, and he will.
You guys go look up some of the routes that he was running in college, and you tell me he's not going to be good with Justin Herbert.
I love what he did. I just really wish he just did more in college, but that team was so stacked. I mean, they had such an embarrassment of riches.
They had
I get it.
They didn't have Brock Bowers running the ball because they couldn't give him enough touches in the air.
I mean, you got Bowers. I mean, at the time they had so many good running backs too. I mean, they were just loaded. This team was just loaded all the time. So, A.D. Mitchell was there at one point. Crazy Pickens was there at one point. I mean, they had just so many people. But I do think that McConkey is going to be a solid fantasy option in year one. So, another good boost to this team that really kind of is rounding out the depth here with these next couple of picks here with Xavier Legette and then Xavier Worthy as well. Legette, I have a hard time with Legette just because I just see so many routes of bust. The analytical profile, the team he's on, the late breakout age, like lots of things going against him. And he's on the Panthers. If I didn't mention he was on the Panthers. So I just don't love it. But I understand the value at the pick was too good to pass up. I mean, he's a first round draft capital guy. It might not be my favorite player, but I do see he's got the profile of a serious number one in the league. I mean, he's got DK Metcalf-like qualities. And he could be the DK Metcalf for Canales that he had when he was a quarterback coach up with Seattle. So, I mean, I could see a world where he does have wide receiver 2 to low end 1 upside if it all works out. But I don't know, Sean, I'm not feeling it.
Could you say he could be like just a bit more like a better version of like a Jonathan Mingo?
I mean, they're not all that different, Sean. 6'2", 220 for Mingo, 6'3", 227 for Legette. Both were late breakouts. Both are 23 years old right now. I never liked the Mingo pick to begin with, but I mean, Mingo had second round capital. Legette first round capital. They traded up in the first to get him. I think they're going to give him every single chance to be on the field. Also, he had a pretty crazy injury history too. So I'm not loving that either. A lot of negativity here for Xavier Legette. What is the positive here? What do you think?
You said the measurables. I think that's probably the biggest one. Like he's going to be able to hang in the league. Like he's not going to be out athleted by many people. I don't know. Like he wasn't dominant in college until he was older than everybody. So that always makes me a little nervous. Not a lot of those guys work out in the league.
Some N'Keal Harry in there.
Yeah. Maybe he should have gone 101.
I mean, but hey, babe, in that year he could have, yeah.
Who knows? Fuck.
Can't win them all.
I just not for me. Like I'm not a big guy. I'm not a big Legette guy. So I've got him as wide receiver 66 this year.
That's significantly lower than I was expecting. But I mean, it makes sense. They have Deontay Johnson there. They're going to feed him quite a few targets. Adam Thielen's still there. It's not like they don't have anything at the receiver position, so he's not going to be like a shoo-in for a starting role right out the gate.
What do you make of the coaching change there? Like, I think it's a good thing. I think Dave Canales is.
I think he's a good coach. I think they're going to run the shit out of the ball.
I think he gets maybe a little too much like smoke blown up his ass about the quarterback thing, just because like I think Gino's Geno's good. Baker is
Like,
pretty good. Like
they're solid players. Yeah. I mean,
I think if you run like a logical offense for those guys, I think they're going to do exactly what they gave you. So I don't know. I like him. I think he's a good coach. I think maybe a little bit is made of that. Like
yeah, just I don't feel like he's like this any like a guru or anything. Like I think he's just a really solid offensive mind that knows, okay, we have to run the ball to be successful, and we're going to work off play action. We're just going to make the most of our receivers, and it just makes sense. Like you said, a logical coach, which there's not a lot of coaches like that, where it's you're not a guru or you're not just a complete schlub. But he's kind of right in the middle. And that's fine. That's kind of what the Panthers need. They need some stability. Like they just don't have anything.
He'll get you a coaching job. So,
yeah, so I'm looking forward to seeing how he does. Hopefully not against the Bucks though. So we have Xavier Worthy next. Really polarizing prospect, 165-pound prospect in the kind of the Tank Dell mold, if you will. Sean, I'm not sure what to make of him this year. I feel like he could, get out to a hot start and maybe become a fantasy relevant player, but they do have other guys on this team now. Obviously Rice will probably be suspended. Tony's still in the mix, but they have Hollywood Brown too, so he's not going to be, without anything.
Sky Moore would like to be part of this conversation here.
I mean, I saw him on the list here, and I just went right by him. So I looked at Mecole Hardman harder than I looked at Sky Moore. So very strange.
Once again, though, I don't have a lot of good things to say. Like he wasn't for me. He's an outlier, and if people's like comp is going to be Deshaun Jackson, I'm not going to believe it until I see it every time.
I think it's a bad comparison anyway. I mean, just from a play style perspective.
I think he was a better route runner in college than Deshaun Jackson was. Like,
that's what I was about to say. Out of all of these like speed demon, first round picks or whatever that have come out in recent years, there has been nobody that's run as good as route and as technically as sound as he is at his size. Like all the the John Rosses of the world and the Darius Hayward-Bays and these super fast guys, like he is truly a receiver. And that's why, like, after seeing Tank Dell succeed at doing very similar things that he was doing in college, like there is a path where this could really work out in a Tank Dell role. That being said,
path where he breaks his leg because he's in on a running play in week 4.
Now we're talking. So it's like it's very scary though. It's scary.
Yeah, he hurt his hamstring like the first 2 days of rookie OTAs. Like,
yeah, he hasn't played since.
He doesn't even have pads on yet, and he was
no.
And he's running all those things without pads on. Like, I don't think it's that big of a deal, but I think there's something to that.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. He's an athlete. We're not saying he's not an athlete. It's just that I think there's a lot of question marks still, mostly with the size, though.
If there's a vertical threat on the Chiefs, I think it's Hollywood. I don't think it's him this year.
I think Hollywood is the chuck it and pray guy. I think he's just. Yep. I think he is doing what MVS did, but just a totally different body type. I think it's just he's going to go long. He's going to be slants and drag routes. I think that's it. So I'm intrigued to see how the offense looks now with some different talent, though. Last year was tough to watch for the Chiefs at receiver. All right, let's go on to Rashid Shaheed. Very underrated player. Everybody likes Rashid.
Love this guy. He's great.
Who doesn't like him? Had a really solid year last year. I don't want to call it a breakout year at wide receiver 40 or anything, but he did look good when he had the chances to make plays. He finished with 46 catches, 719 yards, and 5 touchdowns. Good enough for wide receiver 40. He will likely be a starter next year. Wide receiver 2 across from Olave. I think his only real true competition is A.T. Perry at this point. But they play very, very different games in completely different roles. So I think Rashid Shaheed is going to be in that Devery Henderson role, if you will, where it's a lot of go routes. But he will be on the field. And I think you're looking at another 800-yard type year. Maybe a limited upside overall. But I like him.
I think he should be an every week flex play for Dustin if he actually wants to try and win games, because he's going to have
he's a home run hitter.
He's going to have 4 or 5 weeks where there's just 13 points in his column for 1 catch or 2 catches. So and that's he's a best ball hero kind of guy. but I love him.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, he'd be a fun like underdog pick for sure. And I mean, with Shaheed, I think just looking at this depth chart, if Olave goes down, this team is trash at receiver. They are so bad. They have nothing.
They're kind of trash anyway.
I mean, they're trash to begin with, but they don't even have anybody. Like, I don't see there. Like some of these teams have. Oh, we have a Darnell Mooney, or oh, we have this. Like, they don't have that. It's just they're going straight down to the Bub Means and Equanimeous St. Brown. It's going to be a rough sled if another one of those concussions come up for Olave. So I think Shaheed's going to have touches, but it'll be interesting. Khalil Shakir's next guy on the list here. He is a little bit of a weird situation this year as well. They brought in Coleman. Everybody expects Kincaid to take a little bit of a step up, but he seems to be in a starting role as of right now, whether it be in the slot or maybe on the outside. But it feels like he's going to play quite a bit of snaps. So do you think there's upside here to get to 1,000 yards this year? He finished with 611 last year.
Probably not. I don't know if anybody on this team is going to get to 1,000 yards receiving, to be honest. I think Kincaid probably has the best chance, but I don't know. I'd be curious to see. Like I think if anybody tells you they know what's going to happen with the receiving room for the Bills, they're lying.
I don't think they know.
Yeah, so I don't think so. I think I'd be curious to see who ends up being the better option this year between him and Coleman, but I don't think either of them are a guy that you're going to want to start regularly.
I mean, Curtis Samuel's there. I forgot about him too. I mean, I feel like
Curtis Samuel too, honestly, might be the guy. Like, which is
crazy to do about.
Yeah,
I haven't seen Samuel hasn't really done anything in recent years.
Should
he's had like 600 yards a year, basically.
Yeah, Mapletron on that team too. Who knows?
Oh, hey, now we're getting crazy. We're getting crazy now talking about Mapletron.
He had a great OTA. Okay,
top 5 receiver in the league.
Oh yeah, he's still on a bench, right? Finn still have him?
It's got to be on a bench somewhere out there. I mean, you can't not. You got to keep him at this point.
The guy scored 4 touchdowns in a game. You got to keep him on the team.
I still can't believe that happened. All right, Malachi Corley next on the list.
Don't care.
I got to tell you, I feel similar. I just don't think he's a receiver yet, and I think Xavier Gibson might be better, which is crazy.
When I was talking about Chase Brown earlier, about a guy that you literally just design a few plays for a game, like he is like the
fucking Laviska Shenault,
like the guy you think of for this. Like, let's draw up 5 like weird plays for Malachi Corley.
I thought this was a bad draft pick.
Which is fun until you realize the guy that's drawing up the plays for the Jets.
Not ideal. Not an ideal scenario.
That was to be a coach that needed a stadium to count down his play clock for him. So, not into it. He's my wide receiver 93 this year.
And I don't really have anything bad to say about that. I think that's exactly what I expected this point.
Honestly, I have him listed as a cut candidate on this team, but he also has young upside, so you can't really cut him. You drafted him.
Yeah, and he's 309.
You're not a contender, so I think you owe it to yourself to keep a player that you draft like that. So
I'm just shocked that he went as high as he did in the NFL draft. With all the other receivers, I was just surprised that they traded up for him. I was like, man, that's the guy. Like, out of all these guys
drafted,
I don't know. But the Jets always boggle my mind with the draft. So,
yeah,
anywho,
so bad.
They're just not good. Next up on the list is Darnell Mooney. Ends up in a pretty interesting situation here. Likely to be the wide receiver 2 in this offense. Hasn't had more than 500 yards over the last 2 years, but did have an 1,000-yard year in 2021 with 140 target year, which is totally insane. So it's not like he can't do it, and I've always liked his talent overall. I feel like he's a good route runner. Might be a little small, but he's just a fun, exciting player, and I feel like he's a perfect fit as a wide receiver 2 across from London. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree with all that. I think he's going to be, at best, 4th in the pecking order on that team. Mm-hmm. Cousins did tamper after being tampered with the Falcons. Like he recruited him to the Falcons. So I mean, that's not nothing. So we'll see. I mean, he was worth losing a 5th round pick for the Falcons for.
Apparently. So I mean, I'd trade a 5th for Darnell Mooney right now. I have no problem with that.
Yeah. I've always liked Mooney. I just think being, like I said, at best the 4th option on that team, I just don't think he's gonna have a lot of fantasy value outside of like a couple of maybe like spike weeks where he gets a deep ball or something like that. So
He just seems like a quality number 2 receiver to me, like for
he
NFL purposes. Like he's just
can do
totally
worse.
fine. Yeah, do a lot worse. Elijah Moore, I'm out. I've been out since day one anyway. I just don't see it, especially now that I brought in Judy.
I don't understand how, like, I feel like I've seen like a lot of experts be like, yeah, the Browns wide receiver room, great.
Is it
What?
though?
Is it?
I mean, Amari Cooper's good. Jerry Judy's like okay, and then Cedric Tillman.
And
Is that like
not to
he
shit
can
on
do
Dustin.
anything?
Dustin's got 40% of the receiver room on his roster, but like,
He's just hoping one of them hits.
I mean, Tillman's like once again young upside. He came from a really weird, hokey offensive scheme in Tennessee. So
That was a trash scheme. You could say it, Sean. It's okay. It's trash.
yeah. So it's like him and Hyatt were really tough to really scout just because of the offense there. So I don't know. Tillman's been getting a lot of hype out of camp too. So we'll see there. I don't know. It's tough for me to complain. I've got one of the receivers on my bench too. So
I mean, he's just like a high upside guy potentially, so we might as well hold on to him and see what happens. I mean, it took him 305 last year, so you got to probably give it another roll here. Moving down the list here, I don't think we're going to make much noise about these 3 guys at the bottom. I still think Gibson's a better player than Corley, so I'll say that.
yeah.
And then Bobo and Heath are probably cut candidates, so we'll get back to that.
What if they combine their names and their name was Bobo Heath? Do you keep them in your roster then?
I mean,
I think that's an auto.
I still think Jig Bobo in general is fine. Like I don't even need the Heath part. But I love it though. I just miss Bobo Wilson. He was so bad. All right, let's go to tight ends. Interesting group here. I like Cole Kmet. I still like him, and I think he's. I still think he's gonna have a chance. So tell me about Cole Kmet, Sean, because it doesn't seem like you're.
No, I like Cole Kmet too. He's just fucking down in the dumps as far as like he's not gonna get anything this year. I don't think.
Yeah, I mean, I like him as a player, but fantasy wise, I'm scared. Yeah. I mean, he finished 8th last year. He finished 7th the year before.
I very much remember defending him when he got his contract. I'm pretty sure. So I like Cole Kmet.
It was a rough contract, but
yeah.
They had money to spend, so you can't even argue with it too much. Like,
yeah,
they had to meet a floor.
They still have money to spend. They were a rookie quarterback. If you got a rookie
quarterback, they're gonna be great for a while now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, like from a fantasy perspective, I'm not feeling him nearly as much as maybe I had been in other years, just because I think they're gonna run a lot of 3 wideouts, and I think there's just gonna be not a whole lot of room in the passing game for him. I think he's gonna be probably 4th on targets.
It'd have to be like a weird tight end or a weird touchdown year for him, which he's
an Eifert type year.
Yeah, that's the only way I could see it being relevant. But I don't think he necessarily. I think he's a good guy to have on this team, but I don't think he's going to really need to rely on him much.
Do you think he gets to 719 yards and 6 touchdowns again? That's what he had last year.
Not a chance.
So by that logic, he'll be wide or tight end 10 or lower for sure.
I think he's closer to like 505 this year.
Dang. Okay, so quite a step down.
Like you gotta like at a certain point we gotta think like where are we gonna rank these receivers?
We're gonna get 90 targets last year.
And that's true. And like okay, that's all great. We're gonna rank these guys here. Where does that put Caleb Williams? Because you have a rookie quarterback now. You're telling me he's gonna throw for 4,500 yards and 35 touchdowns? Because I mean, he's in the best situation of probably any number 1 pick, but I don't know. It's not something I'm going to project. So somebody's got to fall on the sword. I think it's going to be Kmet.
Yeah, I think Kmet. I actually think there's a world where Allen doesn't even play much this season, and then it ends up being
very true.
Odunze,
very true,
and then he ends up as the 3rd guy. But even in that scenario, still probably looking at 700 yards and 6 touchdowns. So it's just the upside isn't quite there. But just a solid guy to have, and he's young. He's only 25, so keep him around, see what happens, kind of a thing. Or you can move him off to another team at the deadline, perhaps. But next up, Pat Freiermuth. Kind of a weird year for him last year. I had him in a couple different leagues. Injured for a good chunk of the year, week 5 to week 10, he was out. Didn't really do anything when he was back. I think he had one good game. He had like 120 yards, and then didn't do anything for the rest of the year.
Yeah, soft tissue injury just fucked him up all year. Hamstring.
It's
Killed him.
tough. But I mean, he did have a tight end 11 finish the year prior, 732 yards, 2 touchdowns. His rookie year, he had 497 yards and 7 touchdowns. So we've seen the flashes from him, but I'm just scared too with the Arthur Smith effect here as well. Who knows? If he ends up in the Genu Smith role, then great, and then if he doesn't, then who is going to be the guy here in this offense outside of Pickens? I feel like it's got to be some combination of Wilson or Freiermuth.
I have it as Freiermuth, so I'm probably higher on him. I have him as tight end 10 this year. So
okay.
I
mean, he finished 11 the year prior, so it's not far off to think that could happen. That's for sure.
I think I'm probably the most pro Arthur Smith guy that plays fantasy football.
I mean, hey, the tight end, he use them.
He uses his tight ends, and he's the only guy that can really run a route on this team. So
I think DeAndre or Mr. Darnell Washington could run a route, but he just does it a lot slower.
Yes, that's right.
I think he's just an alignment.
Will they end up maybe scoring the same amount of touchdowns because he uses them at the goal line like that? Maybe, but I think Freiermuth is going to be. I think he's going to be the second leading receiver on this team. The only other guy that I think would threaten that is maybe Jaylen Warren, but I don't know. I like Freiermuth.
Tough to ask that much of your running back too, but I mean, especially Arthur Smith didn't really throw it a ton to the running back last year. But I mean, this is a weird offense. I think
there's not a single guy that I dislike at what their current cost is on the Steelers. I will say
dude, they're just a phenomenally run organization. They just find a way every year to draft well. The signings that they make are always great values. I mean, obviously the way they handle this quarterback situation to me is masterful. I mean, they paid basically nothing. Have a guy with upside, young upside, and then you have the veteran that still has something in the tank. I mean, they totally rebuilt the quarterback room and literally for no money, which is just unheard of in today's NFL. So,
and they just have a sleeping giant of an offensive line that I think is going
very good. Yeah, they've gotten a lot better.
I think it's going to be really good this year.
And their draft this year was awesome. I'm looking forward to it. I feel they're gonna be a fun team to watch. I used to kind of hate watching the Steelers last year because Pickett was so bad, and then all the random quarterback stuff. It was just not an exciting team to watch. But I feel like it'd be better this year.
That's Philadelphia backup quarterback Kenny Pickett to you.
Jesus, I still don't understand that. But anywho, Luke Musgrave next up on the list. I'm a huge Musgrave fan. I have been since last year as a prospect. Didn't play a ton last year. He did get hurt a good chunk towards the end of the year. But I just think he passes the eyeball test. I think he has a lot of Ertz qualities. And I think there's room for him to become a much better player this year for fantasy purposes. They just have a lot of mouths to feed here.
Yeah, it's the Kmet problem, but Musgrave has another guy in his own room that is pretty good. So, and is on this team. So he will be
on the field too. They will use 2 tight end sets. They're not afraid.
As soon as Musgrave got hurt, Kraft was solid. He did not do anything to lose playing time.
No, at the end of the year, I mean, I was looking at some of his games just now. It's 7, 3, 6, 11, 6. I mean, those are decent finishes for
a rookie.
Another rookie tight end. Last year. I mean, they both had just about the same amount of yardage and touchdowns last year. So I think there's 2 good options for them. And I mean, I don't know if I love it for it's a great real life offense. Fantasy though, it's gonna be tough to predict.
Dude, fantasy owners are gonna be in this sick head mode of rooting for an injury on that team just so their guy.
Anybody, it doesn't even matter who it is.
Because nobody has any idea. They have no idea who's gonna be the guy. I think the safest guy is either if he's healthy, Watson. I guess. I don't know.
Dude,
I
feel like Reed might be the most just because he at least was on the field for the whole year. Or was he hurt too? I don't even remember.
When everybody was playing, he wasn't on the field.
That's true. He was so fucking good at the end of last year. He had week 10, 14, then 15, 11, 11, 20, 12. I mean, lots of touchdowns, 8 touchdowns.
Yeah, it's a lot of touchdowns. He had eight receiving, 2 rushing last year.
Almost 100 targets last year.
Yeah, it's great. Honestly, the guy that's probably the safest that's going to play the most is Dobbs, which is hilarious because I think he's probably like the least sexy.
Dude, but it's funny, he's actually my favorite. like I'm
Really?
the most dude, I love that guy. He is so Marvin Jones to me. Like he's just like he has that like I'm not gonna separate. I don't care that I'm not gonna separate, but I'm still gonna catch the ball.
Throw it up
and
to me, baby. I'm
gonna
gonna
get you
it.
your 800 yards and 6 touchdowns a year, and I'm gonna walk away. It's just so Marvin Jones.
Just enough to cut into everybody else so nobody's relevant.
Yep. He is the ultimate just screw you at the fantasy position. I still like him, but
I've already staked my claim at what receiver I think is going to be the guy, but
I mean, I think there's just anybody really. I mean, we're just going to have to see. I mean, I can't really predict it, but Juwan Johnson here, mentioned a little bit earlier, he did get hurt, has a foot injury. It seems like he's hopeful to be back by the start of the season, but he'd have to have surgery, so it feels like that might be pretty unlikely. Even last year, like, I mean, he did have a few good games towards the end of the year. Weeks 15 to 17, he had 9, 10, and 15 with a touchdown in each game. But kind of a letdown, too, based on some of the preseason hype from last year as well. Only finished with 368 yards and 4 touchdowns. He is still kind of a young player. He's 27. I actually thought he was older than that. But, I mean, do we see him being a startable player this year for this team?
I think he's a cut candidate for this team.
I mean, he seems like an obvious put him on the IR slot.
True. That is true. But if he's back by the beginning of the season,
then he can't be on IR, I guess, yeah.
Because like of these tight ends, like who's the guy that you're gonna drop?
I mean, it's funny because Eric All is one of my favorite players in the whole draft. So I don't even know
I'm not gonna draft a guy out of Iowa. I'm not going to drop him when I haven't seen him play yet.
No, I mean, you can't. I mean, especially with the profile that he had. Like, I think he's just a quality player. He just hurt a lot. I mean, I think like Johnson would be probably the easiest cut out of this list.
Because you're never going to start. I don't think I would ever start Johnson over Freiermuth, and I don't think he's a better starter than Kmet. Really, I don't think that's.
And he doesn't have as much upside as Musgrave. So like, it's just.
I think he's just
a weird one. And he is a bit of a clog right now.
That's why I'm like he might be a cat candidate for Dustin. So
yeah, that'll be an interesting. So actually, we're at the end of the list here. Actually, no, we have one more. We have the special teams. So I didn't even put the kicker on here, but it's Tyler Bass. LA Rams, pretty solid defense. Should be just fine for him this year.
Well, we'll see. They lost the one of the
best. They lost the big piece of that, but I still think like out of these teams, I still think this is the best overall defense. The Bears are going to be on the come up though, and the Falcons even.
I think I would take the Bears. Falcons.
They got talent.
They've got a good defensive coach. I like that.
Good coach. They have a good back seven. Their front four is still terrible, but they got to figure that out.
Beauty, and they've got no depth at cornerback, so we'll see about that.
Yeah. All right. Yeah, so
I don't think anybody's dropping. If you only have 3 defenses, I don't think you're dropping them. So I think it's going to be players. So let's get to it.
So this is the projected starters, and I just kind of laid out what I thought to be his best lineup as it stands right now. And are there any flex changes you would make? Any players you might throw in? Maybe Rashid Shaheed, like you were saying earlier.
I think I would just throw in Shaheed just because I think I maybe switch him out with Dobbs. Maybe
take out McConkey just for the opening week, just to see him do it for a week, maybe.
Hell no, I'm all in.
Oh, he's all in.
I don't care.
I love the hustle.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's interchangeable. Like Dobbs is kind of the same way, where he's going to have like a couple weeks in the year where he just puts up like 2 touchdowns, and you're going to be like, shit, I should have had him in my lineup. I think they're very similar in that way, so I guess it doesn't really matter. But I don't know. I just like Shaheed for the vibes. More
Sean,
fun.
This starting roster isn't terrible. It's really not that bad.
I like his team. He just doesn't have any studs. Like when I was telling you before we started the podcast, like I literally put in a spreadsheet. Like I did it by like stud, starter, flex, bench depth, and there's not a lot of like there's no studs that I had, but there's like not a ton of like outside of the cut candidate guys. There's like not a lot of guys that I like dislike a lot. So
yeah. I mean, so let's do the cuts here. So out of your list, so how many cuts do we have to make for this team? 9?
9.
All right, so let's find the 9 to cut then.
You're starting running backs.
Yeah, let's go back to the running backs. So I feel like the obvious ones here are Hull, to Ernest Johnson, and then probably Davis. And then Rivers.
I got Rivers, Goodson, Johnson.
Oh, I don't even have Goodson on this list. So there you go.
Yeah. Evan Hull, I want to see who ends up winning the number 2 job behind Jonathan Taylor.
You could at least wait a little bit on that one.
Just because
how many cuts out of this list do we have? How many total?
Hull is a second-year player that didn't play at all as a rookie, so I think he still might be a guy that you might want to hold on to and see if he does anything.
Yeah, they don't grow on trees, those young running backs. So
Isaiah Davis is a rookie; like he doesn't have any really much draft capital, and I think he's just a special team.
I'm out.
Dearness Johnson, probably like 95% cut candidate, but once again, like there's a chance he could beat out Tank. So who knows?
I don't know. I cut him.
I would cut him too.
I'm cutting them. So how many cuts on this list do we have? 4?
Tank. Yeah, I've got Rivers, Goodson, Johnson, Davis.
All right, that's a good 4. So then receivers, cut Heath, Bobo.
Yeah, I had Gibson, Heath, Tillman, Corley, Moore, Bobo.
Damn.
I had Mooney on here too, but I wouldn't.
I can't do it.
I like him too much.
I can't do it.
Well, I just don't know if he's gonna be very relevant.
I'd cut Shakir before I cut him.
Oh,
I don't believe in Shakir though, so I could be wrong, but whatever. I mean, I like. I think Alex Morales is gonna have a field day with these cuts. I think you'll see an Elijah Moore, a Cedric Tillman, perhaps if this happens.
So if I have Malachi Corley as a cut candidate already, he's even playing the NFL.
I wouldn't even like if he was almost undraftable for me. Like he was a 5th round prospect for me.
Yeah, I do have him as like cut candidate, but like with young upside, like I probably wouldn't. But
no, it's not for this team probably.
Yeah.
So how many do we have total here then? So we had 4 for the first one.
Probably Gibson, Heath definitely, Tillman definitely for you.
I want to see Tillman.
Would you rather cut Moore?
I'd cut Moore. I've seen enough.
And Bobo, so Moore.
Yeah.
Bobo, Moore, Heath, Gibson. So that's 8. That's 4 there for a total of 8.
Okay, so we need one more.
One more, and my pick would be Juwan Johnson for this team. So.
What about Kyle Trask?
I forgot about Kyle Trask because
I think we should cut Kyle Trask. I feel like Johnson gives you something.
Fuck you, Cal.
Kyle Trask is gone. You hate to see it. Yeah, so I mean, I think those are not super hard cuts to make.
No, it really isn't. I think he's got options, you know.
But there will be a few of these guys that end up on other rosters. That's for sure.
Yeah.
So that's what we have for this review. Now, Sean, I'll ask you this before we leave. What do you think this team is going to finish at? Do we think this is... let me look back at the Dynabook lines here. I got to go back and find it. Let's see. Dynabook. Betting sheet. Once again, shout out to James for doing the betting sheet. So they got it at 5 wins as the line. Do you like the over or the under here?
My heart says the over, but if I remember correctly, he's got a tough schedule, and he didn't do very well against an easy schedule last year. So
that is very true.
You know what? He's gonna be the first team out. How about that? Fuck it.
All right, so 7.
7th.
Not lock it in 7.
Because nothing ever turns out how we think it's going to turn out. So 7th.
I think next year, you know, even if he finishes 6, 7, 8 this year, whatever it is, 7, 8, 9, I should say, he's got a lot of capital, Sean. He's gonna have a more elite prospects next year on this team, which is exactly what this team needs.
That running back room is going to be looking nice next year.
And at that point, you know, you pair that with maybe one, you know, quality receiver prospect again, and then now we're talking a legitimate fun team for next year with Stroud at the quarterback position too. So looking forward to it for the Elk. But, you know, I feel like this is just going to be a fun year for the Elk. I can see what they got. kind of evaluate some of the talent on this roster, see how things shake out, and then, just back it up with a bunch of draft picks next year. So it should be a lot of fun for him. And then hopefully we can get our first playoff berth since the Louisville Chupacabras back in the day. That'd be quite a feat. It hasn't happened since 2018. So I think we'll wrap it up right there. Sean, any other parting thoughts for the Elk before we get it?
I don't know if I would want to trade a lot of like future capital or anything, but I would love to maybe find like either a trade for like a Nico or a Tank Dell, which is going to be difficult. But like pairing that with CJ Stroud would just feel so nice.
Stack.
So that's all I had. Like I think that's a like young stack to move forward with. I think that's always good to have. So that's all.
Interesting thought for sure. All right, well, we'll leave it right there. Next week we will be doing another team review. Actually, I think James Seafu might be live in studio, so we might do one towards the end of the week here, talking about the Baton Rouge Bombers next up on our list. So look out for the Bombers team review. It's always one of my favorites every year, so we'll see if we can find some more wins for the Bombers this year. And with that, we will let you all go.